The sun hung low over the dusty town of Red Creek, turning the horizon into a band of burning gold. The wind carried with it the smell of horses, gunpowder, and something else, fear. People gathered near the sheriff's office, whispering and murmuring as a man in chains stood before them. His name was Caleb Wyatt, a former rancher turned drifter. Once, he'd owned land, cattle, and a family. But the drought had taken his ranch, and sickness had taken his wife. All that remained were his two little girls, Annie and Hope, their golden hair now dulled by dust, their faces tired from too many nights under open skies. Caleb wasn't a bad man, but desperation had pushed him close to the edge. He'd stolen bread and medicine, and in Red Creek, that made you an outlaw. The sheriff, a broad man with a rough voice, stood tall on the wooden steps of the jail. "We'll keep things fair," he announced to the crowd. "The marshal's orders stand. Caleb Wyatt, for your crimes, you'll face judgment." But first, he paused, scanning the crowd of women who had been gathered from the nearby town. "You're to choose any woman to stand by you. One woman to claim your name and vouch for your soul. If she says you're a good man, your life is spared. If no one does, you hang at dawn." The crowd fell silent. It was a cruel custom, a remnant of frontier justice meant to give a man one last chance at redemption, or humiliation. The sheriff nodded toward the line of women. "Choose any woman you want." Caleb's eyes shifted across them. Some looked away, clutching their shawls tighter. Others whispered, pity in their eyes but fear in their hearts. Who would stand for a man with nothing? Then came a small, trembling voice. "Papa, that's her." Caleb looked down. His twin daughters, Annie and Hope, clung to his legs. Their dresses were torn, their little hands dirty from the road. But their eyes, those soft, innocent eyes, were shining with a kind of hope he thought he'd never see again. "Papa," Annie whispered again, pointing toward a woman in the crowd. "That's her." The woman they pointed to stood out, not because she was the most beautiful, but because she looked the most broken. Her dress was simple, her hair tied back. Her name was Clara Dawson, the town's seamstress. She was known for her quiet kindness, for sewing clothes for orphans and widows who couldn't pay. She met Caleb's eyes for a long, still moment. Everyone waited for her to turn away. But she didn't. The sheriff frowned. "Miss Dawson, you don't have to." But she stepped forward anyway. "I'll stand for him." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Caleb blinked in disbelief. "Ma'am, you don't even know me." "I know those girls," she said softly. "They came by my shop last week asking for thread to fix a doll. I gave them some, and they said their papa would bring payment when he could." Her voice wavered. A man who teaches his daughters honesty, even when he has nothing, can't be all bad. The sheriff shifted uneasily. "You sure about this, Miss Dawson? If he runs, his sins become yours too." Clara nodded. "Then I'll take that risk." Caleb's throat tightened. For months, he'd lived under suspicion, judged for every desperate choice. But here, in the middle of a town that wanted him gone, one woman, someone he barely knew, had just given him back his dignity. The sheriff grunted. "So be it. He's free under her word. Don't make me regret this, Wyatt." That night, Clara offered them a place to sleep, her small cabin behind the sewing shop. The girls curled up together under a quilt she'd made, whispering to each other about angels. Caleb sat by the fire, staring at the flickering light. "Why did you do it?" he finally asked. Clara smiled faintly. "Because someone once stood for me when no one else would. Maybe it's time I returned the favor." Caleb lowered his head. "I don't have much to give back." "You already have," she said gently. "You have two girls who still believe in you. That's worth more than any gold." Weeks passed. Caleb worked odd jobs around town, mending fences, hauling water, repairing wagons. Slowly, people began to see the man behind the outlaw. Clara's kindness spread like wildfire, her quiet belief in him made others believe, too. Annie and Hope started going to school. They'd run through town laughing, their voices bright and full again. Every day, they'd stop by Clara's shop to bring her wildflowers or drawings of dresses. It was the kind of peace Caleb had thought he'd lost forever. Until one afternoon, a rider came galloping into town, the same marshal who had sentenced Caleb weeks before. He dismounted, spitting dust. "Where's Wyatt?" Caleb stepped forward. "Here." The marshal glared at him. "You broke parole. You were supposed to leave the territory." The sheriff looked between them, torn. "He's been working here, Marshal. Earning his keep." "That doesn't change the law," the marshal growled. "He's coming with me." Before anyone could speak, two little voices rang out. "You can't take our papa." Annie and Hope ran to Caleb, clutching his arms. Their tiny bodies shook with fear. "He's good now. Ask Miss Clara." The marshal turned toward her. "Ma'am?" Clara stepped forward, her chin trembling but her voice steady. "Sir, if the law says he must pay, then let it also see the truth. This man works from dawn till dusk, gives his food to his girls before himself, and hasn't taken a thing that isn't his since the day I met him. The only thing he's guilty of now is trying to start over." The marshal hesitated, looking from her to the twins. Finally, he sighed. "Sometimes the law forgets to make room for mercy." He tipped his hat. "You stay out of trouble, Wyatt." And just like that, he rode away. That evening, the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and rose. Caleb stood beside Clara on the porch as the twins played in the yard. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. Clara smiled, eyes glistening. "Then don't. Just live a life that makes it worth it." Caleb looked at his daughters, laughing, free, and then back at the woman who had risked everything for them. "Maybe," he said, his voice soft, "you're the one they saw that day, not just someone to save me, but someone to save us all." Clara looked at him, the wind brushing her hair across her face. "Maybe they saw what love looks like before we did." And for the first time in years, Caleb Wyatt felt something he thought he'd buried with his past, hope. As the last light faded over Red Creek, two little girls chased fireflies while their father watched beside the woman who had turned mercy into a miracle. Because sometimes, salvation doesn't come from angels or miracles, it comes from one kind heart brave enough to say, "I'll stand for him." Moral. Dizzy true redemption begins when someone chooses to see the good in you, even when the world refuses to look.